Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for...
And now the end is near. Or is it? UnSpun.
It's not over.
Well, kind of over. I think we have to address the elephant in the Orca. Is that a thing?
The whale in the ocean.
What
the
did the
big
Orca eats? The
mammal.
Orca eats what's the Thais? Did you know that? Orcas eat
I
Thais.
I I did
That's
know
I think
that.
that's a joke of maybe why it's called the Orca. I don't know. You go ahead and tell. I think everybody's maybe heard the news.
Well, I mean, we often talk about our editor-in-chief at the Orca and how much we love and respect McLean Kay and the hard work that he puts into this publication each and every day. He is, you know, one of the most tireless workers, and now I'm not blowing smoke, because to not bury the lead, he's leaving us.
Yeah.
He's leaving us. So, but I mean, I know my columns won't be as polished as they've been with McLean's incredibly deft red pencil, the proverbial red pencil, as our editor, and being got to give a shot across the bow at Jordan Bateman, because he definitely was taking shots at you underscore on the final bcpoli hot stove, which I highly recommend people tune in and check out. The orca.ca will continue to be available. Like, you'll still be able to read what's there and watch what's there, and you'll be able to find all of our archives and stuff, but we really don't know what the future might hold. And certainly we don't know what's going to happen necessarily with UnSpun. So we've decided to sort of take things into our own hands in terms of making sure we continue, right? We've made the deal. We're going to keep going. Okay.
Yeah,
What are we going to do?
I mean, we want to get to the election on October 15th. We want to talk about that. So we can't not conclude, at least, if we're going to keep going. But let's go to the election in October. So yeah, we'll move to our own site. It's called unspunpodcast.com, where you can sign up. Will be live. It's kind of live now, so you can go there now and get your name into our email list, and we'll follow our pattern of trying to record on Thursdays, and I'll post them on our YouTube channel, which will be available, and as well as the audio channels. But for now, just go to to unspunpodcast.com. And sign up, and then you'll get informed of our latest, things. And we might be adding other stuff that's not just us. Who knows? The channel could have all sorts of fun things. But for now, because the Orca is kind of sort of a hiatus, I think we'll call it for now, because of McLean's departure. We need a place to put our rants, our unspinning of the news of the day.
So let's dive into that, because this is not necessarily, usually we try and focus primarily on stories that impact and affect those in British Columbia. And yeah, we go federally as well, and sometimes international. And I'm going to start on the international piece here, and not to go on a big deep rant and not to talk about church and state and blah, blah, blah. I want you to take the spin out of the political impacts or possible political impacts of what we're seeing happen in the Supreme Court leak of this draft to overturn Roe versus Wade and fundamentally impact and change a woman's right to choose what happens to her body, full stop. I don't even want to get into the depths of abortion and who thinks what, and pro-life and pro-choice and when life begins and all that. I just want to acknowledge that as the daughter of a feminist, a very driven, almost hippie-like, bra-burning, unbelievable beast of a woman who taught me to never allow anyone to make any decisions about my body except for me, because I will have to live with the consequences of such things. I cannot imagine what it's like to live in the United States right now and see this 50-year-old right to choose, the law of the land being what it has been since Roe versus Wade was established as a precedent in the United States, giving the woman's right to choose. And it made me want to say things like, how about guys just have a vasectomy, and when they're of childbearing years, we'll just have it reversed. Like, that's how ludicrous it is. Yeah. Right. But that's how ludicrous it is for somebody. And believe me, I'm beyond childbearing years. This is not going to affect me. And I have a son. So, I mean, I'm trying to raise my boy to understand a woman's right to choose and what consent means. And we're trying to, change and evolve
Mm-hmm.
societal
Mm-hmm.
norms to this new. There was a time not long ago, George, in all of this, that women were not allowed to have a credit card without a man.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
like,
I'm old enough to remember those days. I'm old enough to remember Roe v. Wade. I mean, that when that happened, because my mom was a very strong woman as well, and I don't think she was a bra burner, but she definitely was an independent woman and had a career and all those things.
yeah,
But she was also a stay at home mom too. She had both. She did the career for a
that's all
long time,
good.
and then she stayed
Yeah.
home for a long time. Then she went back to her career, but and then if you lived through the 80s, you saw Canada's progress on within our constitution. We were actually behind America on making this a national issue. So it's worrisome, from our point of view. People say, "Oh, well, it's not Canada." Well,
I get that a lot.
this kind of decisions, if it does happen, we still, it may not, you know that it has ramifications in all the Western cultures. And I think America does sort of lead the way. And if they are heading towards a much more conservative movement in general, and we've seen this divide significantly politically, that this has risks for all countries in the Western world. This also is, people say, well, why 80% support
Of
um,
Americans.
of Americans, and I
Yeah,
think it's slightly higher in Canada.
it is.
But we talk a lot about wedge issues in politics, and this is an effective wedge issue. I don't think the Republicans are happy it leaked. They're on this rant about hunting down the person who leaked it and putting them in jail immediately. So that's become their focus. It's not about the issue of what happened or what the courts might do. It's become an issue of how dare they? Our system is failing us because this leaked. Whereas the Democrats are going, this is the
Not
system's
about the
failing us
leak.
because the Supreme Court is now biased and not using their proper skills as judges, as it were. So,
And all of those
I,
judges, let's just interject here, all of those judges in their independent, the hearings prior to them ascending to that lifetime appointment were asked about Roe v. Wade specifically, and and said that, well, that's precedent, that's law, we'd never change that. All of
yeah,
them said that. And that's the conversation that's going
yeah,
on, that the Republican side is trying to, like, let's stop that discussion and do the sparkly thing. But Keith Baldry dropped a beauty of a stat on the day that the leak actually hit the news, that
mm-hmm.
Roe v. Wade, the actual decision, was leaked the day the decision came down. It was leaked first to a newspaper before it was officially announced by the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court. So it's not that unusual that there's a leak. It's just it's the only real spin that can be put on this, without actually unpacking what is happening there. And when it comes to the politics, and let's just put the subject matter aside somewhat here, because
Mm-hmm.
we do hours on it. I want to pick
Mm-hmm.
your political brain. You said wedge issue. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how might this be used if they say, 79 or 80% of Americans agree that women should be in charge of their own bodies? If you don't want to have an abortion, don't have an abortion. If you want to have an abortion, go ahead and have an abortion, kind of thing, is the 80%. So how does this impact the midterm elections that are coming up? Does it rally the Democratic base to come out?
Well, it certainly might. I think that's what you're seeing right now, and a lot of people are analyzing that, saying, "Yeah, this is actually a good thing for the Democrats." At the end of the day, though, they can't change the judicial structure that's currently there, which is dominated by Republican leaning judges. So, and you can see the messaging already, as I kind of touched on, where the Republicans are now talking about conspiracies and about leaks and about government is broken,
Right.
Democrats, conspiracy, evil, really not even talking about the actual issue. And so if you're in America, which is quite different than here, where you actually have to say you're a Republican or Democrat,
Yeah.
getting out the vote is always key to winning in an election. And so it's going to be a vote getter outer for both parties, I think. And so therefore it could be a wash, I think. But I would say that even if those 80%, even if those women who are Republicans who are supportive of not changing, or like they don't want the thing to change, they still would not potentially vote Democrat, and they still would probably vote Republican because they just do. And it's really hard to get people who are so affiliated to party politics to change their vote. It's the ones who aren't affiliated, or it's getting out the vote, getting your people who are already affiliated. So that's where the Democrats could win, but the Republicans could pull their vote. Because not every what is the voting? It's less than 50% in America vote. So you don't need to get much more out of your base to change
to swing it.
So it's really it's what a wedge issue is. It gets people galvanized and focused, and it gets the vote out. And so right now we're saying that's going to work for the Democrats. But if the Republicans play this game of continuing this conspiracy and this is stolen, this issue that not only with the election, but now they're going to say this kind of feeds into that narrative that there's something going on in the back rooms of government. That we need to fix, and you need to vote for us to fix that. Never mind the abortion issue. This is about fixing government, and that's what we're here for. And people, okay, fix government. What? Yeah, they don't even hear. Meanwhile, Democrats are saying abortion, and the abortion issue is important, but it's like trying to win an election on budgeting, and it's really hard. You really want to focus on stuff that it's a complicated issue, and it's where they're talking about conspiracies and feeding into a narrative that they've been working on for a long time. The Democrats will have to find a way to feed the narrative of this into open government, or our system is broken in their own different way. I think the big debate of these elections, the next elections in the fall, will be about government and how administration, and that'll be the debate. It's about how do we want to govern our country in America. And that's an interesting and it's happening here in Canada. We're seeing this week with the Prime Minister, and today was all this, did he drop the F-bomb? We had a premier do it last week. He mouthed the words, apparently. I don't know, you see this kind of craziness starting to happen in our system, where we're, and we have Pierre Poilievre and his giant rallies happening for him, very Trumpian. He's not Trump, I'm saying, but this rally concept, well, it's not very Canadian, but it's something that's happening, and we have to watch all this, and finding those wedge issues, those things that get people really angry, can be very effective in getting your vote out.
And it's interesting, the distraction at play, right? Like there's so much, as you were mentioning, with regard to the shadow F-bomb that didn't happen, whatever, completely pulls the attention away from what's actually happening, what's actually on the table, what's being discussed. Why was the frustration? What was the level of frustration all about? Because the headline is not about the thing. It's hijacked the narrative. And it works to do that. Confused electorate really works to the benefit of the politician. Yet another george-affleckism that has, been taught over the 170 episodes of this podcast. You talked about the getting out to vote piece. Not a huge turnout for the by-election for that Kevin Falcon secured, the seat he needs to become that opposition leader, and but House, winning by was it 59%?
Pretty solid. I mean, the Conservatives did better than people thought, which is
really
worrying for them. I think they got 8%, but that's a big chunk in that riding, which is fairly strongly BC Liberal. To see 8%, which they ran a really negative campaign. The Conservatives very anti-Falcon, anti-Liberal. Anti-BC Liberal, so a little taste of potentially what we're going to see in the next, and whether or not Kevin Falcon can keep the center and the right of center together, which is always a challenge in British Columbia. It's certainly a challenge in Vancouver, keeping the center and the mushy middle, who sort of float around left and right, but then and the right, they're always looking for a home. That middle, your column is called the middle. It is about finding that balance, right? And in politics,
I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool anybody, and that's why it's so funny when I get people coming at me, just accusing me of being this or this, and I'm like, you've never asked me, nor would I answer the question, really, frankly, as somebody who's in the media. But to be the assumption of political stripe is fascinating to me. So that's why I do find myself being I pull out mushy and just make it middle, because I want commonsensical government. And that's why I find very frustrating the turn toward what we've been seeing works in the United States and elsewhere, frankly. I mean, you go across
Mm-hmm.
the pond and you watch what happened in France. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Macron did not expect Le Pen to, compete to the degree that required that runoff. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, whoa, but here we are, and that
Mm-hmm.
takes us back on the journey of when you make the assumption that the worst wouldn't happen, and yet it could.
Mm-hmm.
I'm spinning back to the beginning of our conversation a little bit here, but it's interesting to me because I was watching bcpoli Hot Stove with Jordan and McLean, and they were talking about possibly rebranding the BC Liberal Party, and I think there's a lot to be said for, that, and they kind of joked about it, like they're,
Mm-hmm.
how does that look? You've got branding in your blood.
Yes.
Curve Communications is a piece of
Yes.
your puzzle. Like, what do you see happening there? Because there are people who are dyed in the wool one way or the other who will never vote for the BC Liberal Party. But could the Liberal Party change? Because they're clearly getting some traction here, right? Like,
I
with
think the bigger challenge is not that. It's the conservatives that hate voting liberal. That's their
right,
challenge. That's what they're hearing,
right,
and that's not
liberal,
the Lower Mainland. People in Vancouver might feel more comfortable saying BC liberal, as opposed to conservative or any other weird name, BC Party or
social
whatever they come up
credit,
with. Yeah, social credit. So I think it comes down to this challenge they have. And as a marketing point of view, no, you should changing a party name is very, very challenging. And we'll get into the city of Vancouver politics in a minute, but it's like
yeah,
you have to really you have to spend a lot of money and a lot of energy because when you go to that ballot box, people look for the party. They don't look for the name. They may
right,
not even know who's running in their riding. They just go, oh, BC Liberal, check. So this,
right,
if I change the name and if it doesn't placate the
resonate,
conservatives or doesn't bring the conservatives in and they still run a strong campaign, if you're a conservative and you go into the voting booth and you got NDP, conservative, party I've never heard of, or party I've just heard about. Oh, and Kevin Falcon's at that party. Well, that's not the BC Liberals. There's an assumption that the voters are paying attention to all this stuff, which we're kind of nerds. We follow this stuff. And local politics even worse. If you can get 5% of people to know what's going on off elections, it's a miracle. So you have to assume that people in marketing. We've got a couple of campaigns going right now. You have to always make the assumption especially on a launch, that nobody knows who you are, and so how do you even start? How do you even build that? How much time does that take? Where does the money come from? So all these questions. So I would say it's very, very, very risky to do it. I would say he'd be better to spend his energy bringing those people in different ways. And I think, is he going to be like Gordon Campbell, who managed to keep them all together? And he, and the conservatives and the liberals, federal liberals, and the conservatives and kept them all as one for a long time, 11 years.
yeah,
And Christie managed to keep together for another term, but things are definitely getting a little bit, when you see that portion of vote up in Dunbar in that riding where Kevin Falcon is now the MLA, you see a movement happening and you have to be careful. They have to be thinking about what that means. And I think that's going to be his biggest challenge. And he can win that battle by not changing the name, but really showing his leadership style. I mean, I think that's what people look for, is a leader. If you're a strong leader, I mean, in Vancouver, we can kind of
let's
bridge to
go
this
into
a
it.
little bit
Let's
because
get into it.
we
Yeah,
have Ken Sim, who ran with the NPA in Vancouver, a solid brand, and he didn't win. And there had no competition, real competition. This time, he's created his own party for whatever reason, because he didn't like his game and he took his ball and went home. I don't know why he couldn't make it run for the NPA again. I know there's a whole board issue, but whatever. Okay, so he's over here creating this new party.
yeah,
Now he had a party that he should have won with over here, and now, but he's going to create a new party, which polling came out today from Mario Canseco's Research Co. showing exactly what we've been talking about. That you have all these parties. You got the ABC party, you got the NPA, you've got Team, you've got what's Mark Marison's party?
one city,
Progress.
progress,
One city is the left wing, but they're not running a mayor.
right?
So you've got four
Oh, really?
mayoral candidates on right of spectrum. one mayoral candidate on the left of the spectrum, which is Kennedy Stewart. Polling today, 42% support Kennedy Stewart. This is just a popularity poll more than a like, would you vote? It was like, who do you recognize?
Who do you know? Yeah.
And he came out at 42. Next was Ken Sim, because they spent $1 million on him in the last election for the NPA. So of course people know who he is. And then Colleen Hardwick with her Team Party came in at 20%, and John Cooper and Mark Marison came in at 8%. That's really bad for John from a recognition point of view. He's clearly not resonating in a general sense. Now, the poll was done by a left-wing think tank or left-wing organization, I should say. Supported by unions. You have to kind of have a bit of thoughts on that. But Mario's polls are usually pretty good. He asks a question, you answer the question. We'll see. But I think that is telling that unless two of those parties go away, that there's really, the math it's just not there for anybody. So you've got all these party names, people come to the ballot box, you're confused. That's going to happen then provincially. That's the same thing. If you have 3 or 4 parties now, if they change the name to the BC Liberals, why not just start another party? Who knows? Why not? It might help the Greens. Who knows? You have to be very, very careful when you change a name or start a new party.
That polling is really quite something, and you do give it context there, but Research Co. has delivered stats in ways that have come to light in a way that you're like, okay, well, yeah, I heard that before. So now it's not surprising that this is the outcome. But when you first laid those stats down from today's polling, as you said, it is what it is. It's that recognition, that name recognition piece. I'm really surprised that John Cooper wasn't higher recognition factor just by way of him being around as long as he has been, and just what he's done with the park board and the conservatory, the Blowdale Conservatory, and the works that he's done there. And he definitely gets in front of things. I'm surprised that citizens aren't more aware of him, whether they agree with his politics or not. As you said, this wasn't a will you vote for him thing.
Absolutely. And what's interesting so far, Kennedy Stewart's team have been attacking Ken Sim and John Cooper together. Now they're probably going to pivot, knowing this data. Go, okay, our real threat now is
Ken Sim.
Is Ken Sim, but also Colleen Hardwick, which at 20%, she's on the ramp up for sure.
Because she just jumped into the game not that long ago.
That's right. And but she's a sitting councillor. She's the only one. So
I don't mean that as
so that gives her
slight to her experience.
No, that gives her a bounce. So it gives her a bounce.
Right. She's like the Kirk LaPointe of this particular civic election.
No,
didn't Kirk come in late?
No, but she has because she's a sitting councillor, she gets a bit more bounce or like bump from that.
For sure.
So it'll be interesting to see who they decide to really focus their energy on, because they may just do all 4 or 3. They'll go or just they want to divide the vote so that it doesn't know one person. So they're going to try and destroy Ken. They'll try to they're really going to attack Colleen now, which could strengthen her maybe. I would say that interesting to see what they may just say. Oh well, NPA is done. We're not even going to bother. So which could help John if he doesn't get it. If they're too busy attacking the other 2 people, he could slide up the other side. Who knows?
Yeah. Anything's possible. October 15th, 2022 is election day, as it is George Affleck's birthday. Let's get to inside council now, because you got the Broadway corridor, you got the Broadway, the plan coming to council. What are we expecting to see and hear?
Well, it's funny. There's a bunch of, the Broadway plan's was started when I was there. So it's a bit behind schedule. Because they have that city plan. How's that going? How's that Vancouver plan working out? $20 million down a giant pit of whatever taxpayer
nothingness.
Hole.
Nothingness.
The Broadway corridor.
Somebody got rich, George. That's what happened there. Somebody somewhere.
Busy. Yeah. Staff got too busy, so they couldn't approve buildings that needed to get built and to deal with our crisis on housing. Broadway plan, though, this is the Broadway, just so people understand, if you don't understand Vancouver, Broadway, which especially the central core, which is around Canby Street to Oak Street, this is where all the hospitals are. It is the second highest employment area in the province. And it's the second biggest business district in the province. It's a massive area. And so right now we're building a train that's going to go underneath all of the way Broadway. And that's why people, oh, why do we need a train? Nobody, it's because of all those healthcare workers there's
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of them,
Who
shifts,
can't afford to live here, that need
and
to
can't
get
afford to
here.
park
Yeah.
at the hospital. So it's really about getting people to this business district. So as a result, this Broadway plan is meant to provide a lot of density at the stations and height. So there's a lot of controversy about the height along Broadway. I'm going, well, it's called Broadway, for God's sakes. I mean, it's like, it's in its word. It's like big. It's a big street. We're supposed to have big buildings. I don't understand why you'd be against it. View
Yeah.
corridors and stuff. What view? You're Broadway's on the decline, basically, for most places. You're above it. Where? If you're in Shaughnessy or Mansion, you can't see the mountains anymore. I mean, okay, sorry. So it's kind of another wedge issue, though. I think that you'll see Colleen Hardwick will say, "Oh yeah, Broadway's bad, but Broadway plan bad," and you see Kennedy Stewart today or yesterday announced about this whole thing about providing guaranteed rental rates not
Rental, yeah.
changing for people who move out. I mean, he just made this up. This is absolutely impossible to implement. It would cost developers so much money that it can't be done. It really can't. There was a process we put in place when I was there with regards to, guaranteeing the same rent for a certain number of years after you move back in. But he said it's like basically you can have your apartment back after it's developed. It's such a PR talk about spin. Like you have no support for this, and it's not even possible. And it's going to literally do the exact opposite, which is get things done and get affordable housing built. This sort of mandating of rates slows down the process because developers just go, I know this hurts people's feelings that the developers like to make money, but they do. And most developments in our province are done by the private sector. Even social housing, a lot of it's done by private developers. So if you don't make it profitable for them, whatever profit that might be, then they're not going to build it. So sorry, if you make this impossible to do, then you're not going to have this stuff built. So therefore your housing crisis continues. So what are you going to start building with what the city of Vancouver, like they have been trying to do, which very unsuccessfully, to build housing? It's ridiculous. And it's all politics right now. Don't even listen to these people for the next 6 months because anything they say is just BS.
Well, it's cookie time, right? Like this is the
Yes,
time
that's
where
right. Cookie time.
cookies get handed out and once the election is done,
do your
when
research,
it's time when it's time to then reestablish and run again 2 years into your term, start that. Then you start doing the ribbon cuttings and the shovels and the trees and the things and the stuff that re-announce the cookies, and then
that's right.
you get elected again, and still those things are never done. Like I've lived in this city my whole life with 10 years in Toronto to see how another city lives, and then coming back here and seeing like, wow, okay, so none of what was needed is done and a whole bunch of other stuff's done. Interesting. Like
And
it's just
as you say,
difficult.
I mean, you talk about this a lot about in this next election is do your research, look at the candidates specifically, don't get caught up in all this spin that's going to be happening and the sparkly things and the cookies, pavement politics, whatever you want to call it. Focus on the people and choose the best people, whatever city you're in. Do your research. It's really important. They're very reachable at a local level. You can go talk to most of the candidates at any of these public events and chat with them.
And you should.
Yeah.
Don't believe the bios. That's a huge one from last election cycle. At the civic level, at the municipal election level, I was completely duped by bios. And here's your weekly reminder that when you walk into the ballot box or when you go into the voting booth and you pull out that humongous ballot that is created to confuse you, you do not have to fill out every single part of it. If you don't know what you're doing, check nothing. Only check what you know. Go in there knowing who you want to vote for and leave the rest. Yeah. I thought I had to complete the entire ballot. You again, George-Affleck, taught me that piece. Next week, I want to make sure that we get into the healthcare issues and wait times and the fact that this week it was announced by our provincial health minister, Adrian Dix, that we've caught up on the surgeries that were missed over the last 2 years of COVID, doing a great job, very much so. Thank you to the people who are working extra hard, completely stretched, exhausted, and mentally exhausted as well in healthcare, trying to save lives here. And the world COVID loss number. Did you hear this today? I'm not sure if you did. We didn't discuss it beforehand, but the World Health Organization had originally put out 6.5 million people had died due to COVID-19 or as a result of COVID-19 related stoppages or the lack of access to healthcare and what have you. They've updated that number now. It's 15 million. So, more than double that. And so just sending that out there to the people that would love to hate listen to us. And they're like, it's just the flu. Well, it's not. And we're still dealing. We're not done. And I know more people with COVID right now than without or have just recovered from it. And some of the most diligent. And so far, I think you and I are the last people standing.
I'm in my office. I'm the last one standing.
I'm the last one in my family. Yeah. It's actually, no, my son hasn't had it to my knowledge. He hasn't had it, but it's really quite something to get into. But I want to talk about healthcare next week on the show. We just short on time and long on topics. So
I got to remind people about our Twitter handles and about the new website to go to next week too. So
at George Affleck, at George_Affleck on Twitter, at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on Twitter. unspunpodcast.com is where you're going to find us moving forward. You can read my column. Hopefully it's not the last column at the Orca. I wrote a little bit about my frustration with the protest levels that continue to rise and how we meet that level with civil disobedience still being allowed, but when and how do we change and pivot and control? I think it's the first time I've sworn in my column. I threw down, see if you can find it. Go to the orca.ca and have a read of my latest column. It's a little bit of a unicorn, but you know what? I love trees. I don't want old growth to be, ripped to shreds, but I also don't want somebody to die in an unnecessary traffic jam. Like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way, and my middle's asking for it. So that's it.
On that note, a better way. We'll see you next week at unspunpodcast.com. Bye-bye.